Hey traders, a very warm welcome to you. So as I do the video, at the moment Bitcoin is hovering around the $6,000 mark, but this video is relevant wherever you are watching it, depending on the chart pattern you're seeing in front of you at the moment. My guess is if you're on this video, you're probably looking at a chart pattern that's generally doing this and is causing a bit of concern for the bulls. So let's look at some of the things and some of the reasons whether Bitcoin could be in a crash or it could be in a correction. So I've got two charts up for you here, and the Bitcoin bulls are going to say, hey, this is where we are now. We are the NASDAQ. This is a really rough chart of the NASDAQ. We're pushing up. We're at massive highs here back in the dot-com boom. We crashed off that right to lows, pushed back up, 2008 hit, but now we're well away up to fresh new highs and everyone is happy. And so they're looking at Bitcoin and saying, hey, we are just here in Bitcoin. We had that little spike. We had that little flurry. And now we're kind of down. Actually, you know what? If you look at the chart, it's pretty similar, right? Here, we plodded along, we pushed up, we had that extreme spike, pulled back, and it's pretty similar. I'm doing this from memory, but it's pretty similar. If you can say this is where we are now, this is kind of what we're doing, maybe a little bit lower, but the pattern's similar, right? And so bulls are saying, okay, we're probably going to push back up again. Fair enough. Interesting reason. The other one, the bears. The bears are looking at this and saying, hey, this is tulip mania, right? It's complete nonsense. There's no validity to this at all. We just had a big bubble and now we're kind of part way through here. And yes, the tulip mania, if you look at the tulip mania charts, there weren't printing off charts obviously back then, but they had the same kind of thing where it's just an exponential growth, and then all of a sudden it just dawned on them that these things were useless. Now, is Bitcoin the same as tulips? Probably not. But can it behave the same way? It could do. So let's look at the arguments for and against Bitcoin. Now, not necessarily for and against Bitcoin, but where we are now, whether we are in a crash or a correction. Now, let me just put my hands up here and say, hey, listen, you know what? There are guys out there who are way more clued up on Bitcoin than me. However, I am looking at it objectively. You know, I don't really cheerlead Bitcoin in terms of, hey, it's going to be revolutionary in this. All I want to know is it going to increase in value or decrease in value? And I'm going to take on the bigger picture and make an assessment based on that. I'm not just going to go on the bandwagon of ultra bear or ultra bull. So let's have a look. Flight to Bitcoin is positive. We have seen in recent times lots of kind of global unrest, and specifically I'm doing this video, we had a global unrest, or not global unrest, we had an unrest in Turkey. They had all sorts of problems. Their lira just basically got devalued, got hammered. A lot of people were buying Bitcoin. We saw a massive spike in Bitcoin purchases on these Turkish exchanges. So that would suggest that a lot of people moved to Bitcoin rather than the usual gold or usual silver in times of strife. So it's a flight to safety, which is interesting because that is one of the main things that the bulls say about Bitcoin. Hey, it's a good safe haven asset to hold. It's where everyone goes to when they feel like they need some sort of protection, when they need to kind of get away from the government intervention, all this kind of stuff. Now, there's a pros and cons to that, right? Because you could say that and say, well, it's safer because it's not under any legislation by the government. But then is it that much safer? Because if you'd gone to safety when you were trading up here, you would be you have your money halved. So you could sort of use the comparison between, you know, a currency that's swinging wildly and Bitcoin. Is it safe? Well, yes, it's not really subject to interest rates, but could it halve again? Quite easily. So there's a bit of a pros and cons to that. Okay, let's not dwell on that for too long. Let's just stick to that point and think about, hey, there was a flight to safety a little bit with Bitcoin, but interesting from my perspective and from a trader's perspective is that we didn't have any price increase. You know, if you would expect a lot of people to come in a country or a massive amount of people flowing to Bitcoin, buying Bitcoin, then generally speaking, the supply-demand imbalance would shift and we would see a spike up. We didn't really see that. We didn't see anything. In fact, we're probably lower than we were when it all started. So that kind of worries me from a pure price action perspective. Like, hey, you know, unexpected response. We talk about this when we're trading earnings, when we're trading news. When we get positive news and the price declines, we assume we're going to get supply-demand imbalance in favor of the bulls, lots more demand, and we don't. That's when alarm bells ring. So that's just something to be concerned about. All right, I just want to add these other thing onto here, which I've mentioned before, talking about Bitcoin, is the power consumption. It can't get away from this, guys. The power consumption by Bitcoin is disgusting at best, right? They are the consumption for transactions, for mining, for anything else to do with Bitcoin is huge. The energy cost is massive. And I still think, and again, objectively looking at this, not cheerleading one way or the other, I still think that is a big, big, big thing that is perhaps dawning on people. And it's only going to take the government, one government to come out and say, you know what, we're taxing it because we're trying to be eco-friendly here. We're trying to be green. And you guys are all sitting around mining stuff, hammering all the power. We need to stop this. Yes, I believe there are other ways of doing it and they're trying to find more efficient ways. And if so, great, then we can cross that right off the list. But at the moment, there aren't any. And that's a big issue, I think, which is starting now to permeate through the kind of investment circles. People think, you know what, that's not so great. That could be a kind of black swan event. Governments come out and say, you know what, it's not acceptable for this. We're doing something about it. Speculators out. So what I mean by speculators out, I mean that this rally here really was a lot of, how can we say, uninformed investors is a really loose word, but guys who really wanted to make a quick buck, right? These guys just wanted to make money. They were just gambling. They didn't really care about the value of Bitcoin. They didn't really care about its utility, didn't really care about anything. They just heard that Bitcoin was going up, and so they bought it. And then it fueled the fire, fueled the fire, fueled the fire. Before you know it, your barber, your taxi driver, your guy who runs the local restaurant, they're all buying Bitcoin. They've never bought anything before in their life. All of a sudden, it's causing that supply-demand imbalance. We cause that shift up. So from a perspective of, hey, is this now going to find a base? That could be positive for Bitcoin. The speculators are out of the market. All we have now are people who are buying it for general belief that it has got utility value. Now, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole in this video, but there is a question that for it to have a value of currency or a value of storage of wealth, I think there are two different things. If it's a storage of wealth, do you really want it swinging wildly? No, you don't. You want a steadily appreciating asset. And with a current, if you want it to be a currency, you don't want it to do either. You want it to be stable and to be highly liquid. So there's two different things there. And you could argue, how speculators out, that's great, maybe we'll flatline. So does that, the question say, is it a crash or correction, would imply that we're thinking, is it going to push up or push lower? A lot of people want it to be used actually as for utility of currency. And for that, you really don't want it to move much at all, because if you do, your exchange rate changes and it's very, very difficult, very hard for people to hedge that risk. They prefer nice and stable. So if that's what people want from Bitcoin, then that's an irrelevant question. If you're looking from a wealth growth perspective, you want to see it improving, you might consider the fact that the froth is all out of it. Maybe now there'll be a supply demand imbalance, a lot more kind of demand comes in and we start to chug up higher and higher and higher. Could be an argument for it. A negative is the ETF delay. We've had a couple of times where ETFs, we had round one, which was denied. We've had round two, which has put a pause on things. Yes, there are futures out there, but for some reason the ETF is delayed again, which suggests the SEC aren't quite happy with what's going on there. So that could be construed as a negative. And then we've got here positive and negative, I haven't made a mistake, for price pattern. And I want to talk about what I mean by that, because this is the real kind of trader's look at things. If we look at the price pattern of Bitcoin, and let's assume this red is our price pattern, we've shot up to ridiculous highs, or perceived ridiculous highs, and we've come back down. Now, that would be really caused by, drone over things, but who cares, the speculators. Okay, those speculators possibly caused that move from there to there, right? We could argue, you could argue for and you could argue against that. However, what I mean by price pattern positive and price pattern negative is that if we didn't have that in there and Bitcoin had gone up from wherever it started out at, $50 or $2 or whatever it is, relatively low compared to 6,000, and had plodded up to 6,000 to where it is now, people would be looking at it completely differently because of what has happened with the chart. If it was valued at 6,000 and it plodded up nice and slowly and it was just going steady, 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 people would think this is the best thing ever. It's chugging up, it's appreciating, they'll be putting more money in it, it'll be flowing. But because you had those speculators causing this extreme imbalance that then came back down again, people are saying, oh, well, actually, this pattern is bearish. And actually, when you look at it just like that, it doesn't look great, right? Because we've seen it come up, we've seen it come down. If it can't find a base, perhaps it will fall through the floor. But if you ignored that and if you said, hey, listen, we've come from here to here, it's now valued at this, it's been trading at this level for a long period of time, is it the new value floor? You would be pretty excited if you'd held it for a long time. Or even if you hadn't, you'd say it's a nice bullish chart, nice bullish price to it. So that's why I put that positive and negative. If you took out the speculator froth, and you have to kind of go with me on that and assume that that was speculator froth, the chart wouldn't be so bad. But with the speculator froth, has that made things peak too soon? Has that made it all look a little bit unfriendly, and actually now everyone's going to come out of it because everyone's going to be anchoring their price based on this high as opposed to the reality, the kind of fair value, if you like, which was probably nearer kind of here because you had that extreme peak. So does that give it a negative sentiment? Of course, it's all about sentiment, guys. Bitcoin is ruled on sentiment. If people have got a negative sentiment on it, if it starts to go at 6,005, you might see a big dumping of it. If it holds that and starts to claw back up, then people may well think, okay, we might get back to highs. But bearing in mind that was a big frothy speculator push, and if you look at it like the Nasdaq, it might take a long time for it to climb back up. Or you know what, we could have been in a bit of a series of years there, and ultimately it was a tulip type thing. It has no value, no one really takes it on board, and it kind of filters off into the background. That's for you to decide and for you to assess how you want to put your money in or not. Food for thought here. See you in the next one. Take care. Bye bye.